When we think about the best camera for beginners, it's not necessarily a smartphone. After reviewing hundreds of camera models, there are a few key characteristics that stand out when recommending a good camera for first-time photographers. Ease of use, value for money, reliable image quality, and features that give you room to grow. Based on many hours of hands-on testing, we think the camera that best matches those requirements right now is the Canon EOS R10. It's relatively lightweight for a mirrorless camera, easy for beginners to use, and has the performance to help you produce impressive stills both now and as your skills improve. That said, our guide also covers a range of alternative options that might be better suited to your interests and budget. If you're looking for a bargain, we've also rounded up a selection of the best cheap cameras. We have listed the 5 best cameras for beginners in 2024, and their key features. You need to consider this to help you choose the best one for you. For more information on the product, as always, I've included a link in the description box down below, which are updated with the best prices on each product. Like the video, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Be sure to stay tuned till the end so you don't miss anything. Now let's get started. Number 5. Canon EOS R10. The Canon EOS R10 is an entry-level APS-C mirrorless camera. In Canon's lineup, it sits above the more explicitly beginner-oriented Canon EOS R50 and Canon EOS R100, but below the more advanced Canon EOS R7. It represents a compelling middle ground with an advanced dual-pixel CMOS 2 autofocus system, compact and user-friendly design, and many automatic shooting modes, along with enough physical controls to keep more advanced photographers happy. The Canon R10 is good for travel photography. Even with its relatively large hand grip, it's small and light enough to be easily carried around in a bag or on a sling for hours. The overall image quality is also very good, and the camera's autofocus system is fast and accurate enough to lock onto moving subjects. Its fully articulated screen also makes it easier to snap pictures from unusual angles. Unfortunately, while it has a longer battery life than its M-mount predecessors, it's still best to bring another pack or two for longer days. The Canon R10 is a very good choice for landscape photography. Its 24.2 MP sensor offers impressive dynamic range and good detail retention, though not to the same extent as a full-frame model. It's also light enough to toss it into a bag without causing too much extra fatigue on long hikes. Its fully articulated screen makes capturing images from less conventional angles easy, and it gets bright enough to overcome glare on sunnier days. That said, while it feels pretty well built, especially for an entry-level camera, it isn't weather-sealed or water-resistant, so it's best to be cautious when shooting in difficult conditions like heavy rain or sleet. The Canon R10 is great for sport and wildlife photography, with a few caveats. In its mechanical shutter mode, its burst rate maxes out at 15 FPS, enough to capture clear stills of fairly fast-moving subjects. Number 4. Nikon Z50. As I strolled through Seattle's Japanese garden for the first time, I was struck by how pleasant I felt. As with all Japanese gardens, the setting is painstakingly polished. Everything is in its proper place. Funnily enough, that's about how I felt regarding the Nikon Z50 I had in my hands. The Z50, as with the full-frame Z6 and Z7, is a pretty wonderful piece of ergonomic design. Its generous grip, well-placed buttons and dials, and general sense of solidity, without weighing you down too much, inspire confidence in the camera as a serious tool for making photographs. And yet, it looks like Nikon is targeting the Z50 as a solution for non-photographers, meaning people that may enjoy taking pictures but don't think of themselves as being photographers. So, despite its pricing putting it up against the Canon EOS M6 Mark II and Fujifilm X-T30, it looks like Nikon's intentions have it going up against the likes of smaller, cheaper options like Fujifilm's X-A7 and Canon's EOS M50. So, is the seriousness of the Z50 going to attract the Instagram crowd looking for a new toy to take their photography to the next level? Let's dive in a bit deeper and find out. It should come as no surprise that the Z50 is a nice camera to hold and to use. I didn't bother with a camera strap because I honestly didn't feel like I needed one, even as I was framing up shots from low, from high, and yes, holding it out over the water to capture some food-crazed koi. Okay, that last bit did make me want a strap. And this starts to get to the heart of what Nikon has needed to do in its more consumer-oriented ILCs for a very long while. provide a decent live view experience on the rear screen. For those users that snagged D3500 or D5600 DSLRs and weren't necessarily familiar with DSLR in the past, I can see the experience being a bit off-putting. Number 3. Canon EOS R50. The Canon EOS R50 is a compact mirrorless camera designed to appeal to users looking for something more than a smartphone. It's based around a 24-megapixel APS-C sensor and Canon's latest RF lens mount. The EOS R50 is Canon's second cheapest RF mount camera, sitting above the EOS R100 and below the EOS R10. The R50 is priced at $679.99 body only. A kit with the retractable RFS 18-45mm f4.5 is STM sells for around $799.99, and a 2-lens kit that adds a new 55-210mm f5.07.1 takes the MSRP up to $1029.99. The EOS R50 is essentially designed as an RF mount equivalent of the EF-M mount EOS M50, an easy-to-use interchangeable lens camera that's practical to carry around. It's a similar size to the EOS M50, but in addition to using Canon's newer lens mount, it also brings a newer sensor and processor, which together deliver significantly more advanced autofocus capabilities. The R50's most compelling feature is probably its autofocus system. It's a relatively simple but very powerful system that combines a series of subject recognition modes with tenacious tracking. In many circumstances, particularly with people, you can pick where you want the camera to focus, and it'll track whoever or whatever you point it at. In particular, the R50 has been trained to recognize people, eyes, faces, and heads, animals, specifically dogs, cats, birds, and horses, or vehicles, motorsport cars and bikes, trains, and aircraft. There's also an auto option that will try to identify which of these subjects are in front of the camera. Number 2. Canon EOS Rebel T7 2000D. The Canon EOS Rebel T7 EOS 2000D is an entry-level camera with an APS-C sensor and the cheapest model in Canon's DSLR lineup. It's an upgrade from its predecessor, the Canon EOS Rebel T6 EOS 1300D, with a higher resolution 24-megapixel sensor, but otherwise it doesn't offer any major improvement to the formula. That's not bad for those looking for a simple and affordable DSLR for photography, but don't expect extras like an articulated touchscreen or 4K video capability. The Canon Rebel T7 is adequate for landscape photography. Its image quality pales compared to full-frame or higher-end APS-C cameras, but it's still very solid for its class. Though its dynamic range is unremarkable, you can still get great landscape shots out of it, especially with good lighting conditions. The camera is also fairly comfortable to use, with simple controls tailored towards beginner photographers, though more advanced shooters may find the lack of command dials limiting. Unfortunately, it also feels quite cheaply made and isn't weather-sealed. The Canon Rebel T7 is okay for travel photography. The camera captures good image quality overall, especially if you're coming from a smartphone. It's bulkier than mirrorless alternatives, and its autofocus system is very rudimentary. Its battery life isn't as good as higher-end DSLR cameras, but it's still good overall and better than a lot of mirrorless options. And despite a somewhat cheap-feeling build quality, the camera at least feels comfortable to shoot with. Number 1. Nikon D3500. The Nikon D3500 is a 24-megapixel entry-level DSLR with an APS-C CMOS sensor that is cheaper, lighter, and has a longer battery life than the D3400 that it replaced. It was designed with the new photographer in mind and features a guide mode that will essentially teach you how to shoot in various situations. The D3500 is available with an MSRP of $499.95 with the AF-PDX Nikkor 1855 f3.55.6 GVR and $849 with the 1855mm and an AF-PDX Nikkor 7300mm f4.63 GED. It can be admittedly hard to get excited about entry-level DSLRs. They're bulky compared to mirrorless cameras and can be somewhat limiting in some respects, but for beginners, they are a great place to start. The Nikon D3400 that this camera replaces was always very good, and the 24-megapixel sensor inside the D3500 is still one of the best APS-C sensors around. The D3500's guide mode puts it into an easy-to-use space in the market. This mode makes it easy to tell the camera what kind of scene you are trying to capture, and essentially teaches you the basics of photography, such as shutter speed, aperture, and exposure compensation along the way. This is a camera that a brand new photographer can pick up and start making decent pictures without a steep learning curve. It's not as simple as shooting with a smartphone, but the image quality is better than you'll get from your phone in a whole lot of situations, especially if you are shooting with a fast prime lens. The D3 is also a great deal. You can pick this one up with a lens for under $500, making it incredibly appealing for newbie photographers.